If you think it's been tough on a lot of people financially because of the pandemic and inflation and everything happening right now, it's been extra tough on younger folks. Gen Z and millennial adults seem to be having a harder time achieving some of the same milestones that their parents did. Joining us now to talk a little bit more about this and what's happening is a financial strategist and also the founder of your dedicated fiduciary, Vance Barse, is here. Vance, good morning. Welcome in.
Well, good morning to you, JT. Thank you so much for having me.
So I was looking at some of these stats here. Harder to find a job, harder to get promoted, and young people say it's tougher to purchase a home right now. Is this all inflation, pandemic related? What's going on?
Well, it's a couple different reasons. Number one, yes, inflation, and while we have all come to learn the word du jour over the last 3 years, which is inflation, the rate of inflation has come down, but it is still significantly higher than what it was for the 13 years when we had near zero interest rates. And the second reason is because of the overall affordability. You mentioned homes. I want to talk for a second about the cost of living versus pay. Now, I'm technically a Gen Xer and a latchkey, quote-unquote, kid, and I have witnessed this myself. So the cost of living has increased significantly from the 70s. Specifically in 1970, the average American's home was $24,600 annually. I'm sorry, the average American's income was $24,600 annually, adjusted for inflation, but the CPI, or the Consumer Price Index, was 38.8. Fast forward to the year 2000, you might remember the dot-com era. Mm-hmm. The average annual income had increased to $38,700, but the CPI had more than quadrupled to 172.2. And lastly, since then, the year 2000, wages have only increased by 80%, while the CPI has increased by over 500%, wow, resulting in Gen Z and their money having 86% less buying power.
Unbelievable. And you couple that with, obviously, the interest rates. Money's more expensive these days. But there is a silver lining to some of this as well, right? I mean, the job market, other opportunities are different than they used to be. And, I believe it's still somewhat of an employee's market versus an employer's market right now. So do we see changes in the pendulum swinging back to favor younger people to kind of open the pathway a little bit more?
It's really interesting to see the job market stats. So while unemployment has dropped from a record low 3.5% up to 3.9%, meaning we've had higher, quote unquote, unemployment, it's still really low. So yes, employees are very much in a driver's seat, and there's ample opportunity out there for Gen Z and millennials. The job market, unless unemployment were to come up to, say, 4.5% or higher, which I just don't see anytime soon, mm-hmm, although anything is possible, I suspect that trend will continue, and we largely have to understand that hard work, dedication, and simply putting in one's time like you did and I did and the rest of us did has not changed.
Yeah, I think that's it. You've got to continue to, get after it every day, and those that do reap the benefits of that, even in tougher times. And pivoting is one of the key things that we all have to do, no matter what field of work we're in or what our life is presenting to us. If it's not working, no sense in continuing to bang your head against the wall to try and make it work because you think it ought to or you think it will. If it's continual banging, don't you think you got to move and go somewhere else? And that can present, a better potential of, growing.
In fact, it can. It's interesting, in the thousands of hours, JT, that I have spent with families around the country, helping them as their in-house fiduciary, the millennials and Gen Z have consistently shared the lack of interest in a conventional job, and they simply turn their phone and show me these YouTube social media influencers who are making multiple seven figures a year, And you know what? Quite frankly, it makes me question my own decisions, JT.
Hey, look, you could do that with a number of rich people that are making gobs of money. I mean, I'd love to be, a famous actor and work in movies and things like that. But Jack Nicholson's and the big actors now that are making the big money. Yeah, they're making good money, but not everybody can get out there and do that. I mean, it is bizarre how social media has really produced a lot of income for people and e-commerce businesses and things like that. If you can, rein one of those, directions in, rock and roll with it. But not everybody can do that.
That's right. The number of people that actually succeed in that type of venture is slim to none, and I'll argue that slim left town. You mentioned housing earlier.
Yep.
Housing affordability stats are just striking. So the median home price in 2022, so last year, was nearly double that of 1970, and that's adjusted for inflation.
Mm-hmm.
And when you take, I'll define it as a high income earning Gen Z or millennial, so 85,000 to 125,000, and you add the cost of student debt, high rent, a car payment, and all that avocado toast, and all of a sudden you realize why this generation, or these two generations, if we lump them together, are having an affordability crisis because it just simply is that much more expensive. And on the social media front, these are two generations that literally grew up staring at an iPhone during the easiest monetary policy regime that this country has had. So we had zero interest rates from March of 2009.
Right.
Listeners will remember 2008, which none of us can forget. But from March of 2009 until March of 2022, we largely had zero interest rates. And the result of that.
Well, look, I get where you're going on this, but my father's interest rate when he bought a home back in the 70s was like 14%. I mean, so when you look at the interest rates now, yeah, they're up from the threes that we loved, and everybody, got drunk on that. But the reality is, interest rates fluctuate and go, and it's not going to be a quick comeback, and it's usually a cyclical thing, that of 10 years possibly on really getting it. But those threes are gone. So I shouldn't there be some shifting and adjusting in priorities for people to kind of, you got to do what you got to do and let go of some things and focus on what you're being dealt here. There is a silver lining in all this. If you get after it and pivot and change your desires, things can happen, right?
You hit the nail right on the head, JT. When I'm meeting with families, I go, we have to really understand where the costs are in the context of history. And I look at the parents or even the grandparents, and I go, do you remember what interest rates were on a home back in the early 80s? Oh, yeah, that was 17, 18%.
Yeah.
I go, I know. So for today, high sixes on a 30-year is high relative to what we had for 13 years. But my fundamental belief and conviction is that period is done and we all need to adjust.
Absolutely. End of story. Very good. Vance, excellent chat. We'll have you back again, I promise. Vance Barse, financial strategist.